Chapter 31. Michelle picked up on the first ring. Oh, thank God. I've been dying for you to call me back so I could apologize. Walking off the empty elevator, Rose announced, I just got made partner, and then I quit. Silence, then Michelle screamed. What? Rose laughed like a happy child. Passing by the security desk, she walked over and held the phone down by her thigh for a second. Harold, I just wanted to say goodbye. I'm going on a long vacation. His eyes went big and he saluted her. You have a good time, Miss Hendricks. She raised the phone to ear again as she walked away laughing. Michelle was sputtering on the other end of the line. Wait, you quit? You? What happened? Where are you going for vacation, Miss Hendricks? Harold called after her. She opened the door with her butt and grinned at him. I have no idea. Somewhere with sand. The sunlight was extra bright as she strolled down the steps and asked her best friend, Can I take you up on that offer for lunch? And can you go now? Hell yeah, Michelle yelled. I'm around the corner. Oh, her voice lost its happiness. I moved in with Nathaniel. God, I'm so sorry you had to find out. Rose interrupted. Stop. It's fine. A lost phone I can forgive. Want to hear all about moving in? That's so exciting. Just don't talk to me about Eli anymore. Meet me at Potbelly? Done and done. 15 minutes later they were hugging at Potbelly sandwich shop near the carved wood sign that read, Good vibes, great sandwiches above a sweet store. Motto that ended with, We're not just in your neighborhood, we're your neighborhood sandwich shop. The place was small, quaint, and had some of the best lunch yummies for Rose's money. The two friends ordered quickly and claimed one of the few tables they had. You first, Michelle said, drinking a strawberry smoothie. Rose launched into the story of how she'd told them off, not missing a single detail. Being a litigator, she knew how to get her audience to feel what she wanted them to feel, but with Michelle caring about her as much as she did, it was even easier, and she got all the right squeals and shocked cries at all the right times. At the end, Michelle took a bite of her meatball sandwich and said with concern, But you've worked so hard for that. What are you going to do now? Rose sighed and picked up her iced tea, playing with the straw as she glanced out the window. Two things happened in there. One is what I just told you. That they were giving it to me for the wrong reasons and were so full of themselves and acting like they'd bestowed something I didn't deserve upon me. I just didn't want to work hard for them anymore. And two is I realized that I really believe I should be partner. Michelle frowned and cocked her head, not getting it. Rose took a sip and explained, I'd be an asset. I know it, and if I think that, then why not start my own practice and call my own shots like you do? Brown eyes went wide like she couldn't believe she hadn't thought of it. Of course. You'd be so great. Yeah. Rose smiled nervously. Felt so good to talk to Michelle again. Her thoughts flew to Eli and his warning that them being together with their best friends married was bad news. She knew that wasn't the whole reason, but maybe he was right? She took another long sip and set the cup down. You think I can do it? Of course you can. They say you never have a dream without also having the ability to make it come true. I think it's the best idea, Rosie. You'll be so much happier. I've been happy. They stared at each other until she quietly admitted, Okay, so I haven't been joyful, but I do love my job. You work too hard, Michelle said. Coming from you, that's a hoot. She rolled her eyes and picked a pepper out of her Italian sandwich, popping it in her mouth. A hoot. Michelle laughed. You've been spending too much time with stuffy attorneys. Ain't that the truth? So, you've moved in. Tell me how it happened. Michelle threw a potato chip in her mouth, talking with it full. Well, we'd spent the last couple weeks bouncing between places and I wasn't really thinking anything because everything happened really quickly and I think my head has been in the clouds. She waved a chip in the air, then ate it while still talking. Then just yesterday after Rose interrupted. Oh yeah, you had a big meeting or something? Michelle shook her head. It didn't go well. A potential new client, but she wasn't ready to commit. Still laying the foundation down for something maybe in the future. Anyway, I call Nathaniel and he shocks me with the news that Eli wants to give us their place. It was his idea. He's so nice. Couldn't believe it. So generous. You haven't been there yet, but they designed their whole flat and it is incredible. They're really talented. Nathaniel says Eli is going to completely make over my place. I can't wait to see what he does. Michelle didn't see Rose's eyes lose their shine as she kept going on and on. About that dimple-cheeked bastard. Did he seem happy when you dropped by? Hope he doesn't regret it. She took a bite of her sandwich and chewed, waiting for an answer. Rose looked out the window, her voice casual and light. Yeah, he seemed to like it. I don't think he'll ask you to move back. I have no doubt he'll redecorate. Michelle frowned a little. Why? What's wrong with my place? It's a woman's home, and he is definitely not a woman. Michelle wiped some tomato sauce from her lip, smiling to herself. No, he's sure not. Those four aren't even men. Her eyes flickered and blinked to the table. We know men, right? They're more than that. Rose wanted to tell her about what she'd seen, but Michelle was covering something up, and that wasn't like her. Rose scanned her closely. She'd been trained to spot a liar, and she was looking at one now. Is that all, Shell? She asked carefully. Michelle smiled. What else would there be? I'm just saying it's no wonder the guys are all friends. They're all so dynamic. Grabbing her smoothie, she changed the subject. I wish I'd been there when you quit. I bet you were amazing. A warm feeling spread from her heart at the memory, and since she knew she wasn't getting an answer from her friend right now, she leaned over the table and said with feeling, Thank you for sharing this with me. Michelle reached over and held her hand. Of course. I'm sorry I wasn't there when you won the case. Rose gave her fingers a squeeze and let her go. But you're here now, and that's all that matters. I'm just glad we tell each other everything, she added, eating her sandwich and watching Michelle's face closely. Everything. Yeah, it's a good feeling. Rose nodded, her curiosity spinning her psyche to pieces. It sure is. You know what I think? I think Eli likes you. Rose almost spit capicola and mozzarella all over the table. Did he say something? Michelle smiled at the spit take. Not to me, but when he gave me my phone. Back last night he was talking very fast about how he knew you were mad at me. I've never seen him that nervous. And yeah, I haven't known him long. But she stopped to pick her words carefully. Those guys aren't nervous types. I think you get him a little excited. Rose wanted to punch herself for her reaction to the news. Instead of being indifferent, she'd nearly leapt out of her skin with hope, but then just as quickly as she'd felt it, it was gone. Of course he was nervous. He didn't want you to hate him for throwing me out. And for lying to me, like you're doing too. What the hell was going on? I think you're wrong, Shell. But thanks. She pushed her half-eaten sandwich away. I'm not hungry anymore, and normally, all of this would be gone, I guess. I'm too freaked out about my job, she lied. Michelle leaned forward with a grin. You want to go get a drink? Rose pulled out her phone and saw it wasn't even noon yet. Stuffing it back in her bag, she laughed. Fuck it. Let's do it. You know what I really want to do? Know what? I want to go on a long vacation. That's what I really want. Then do it. You've got some savings, right? Rose thought of all the money she'd hoarded away since most of her school tuition had been paid by the insurance money her mother had gotten when her father was hit by the drunk driver. She'd saved it for Rose's school, wanting something good to come out of something unbelievably terrible. It made Rose work all the harder, and the only reason she didn't graduate at the top of her class was she had a mouth on her and talked back to her professors too often. That attitude paid off when she was actually practicing, though, and with the money she earned since she had no student loans, she kept her costs down and grew a good chunk of change in the bank. Yeah, but I have no income right now. You'll get clients soon. How? She laughed, overwhelmed at the thought. Word of mouth for one. And you'll need to set up an online presence. Rose balled up her napkin and squeezed it for stress release. Right. Okay. You'll help me. Michelle lit up. Are you kidding? It'll give me a chance to pay you back for that case you won for me. Excitement spread throughout Rose's mind and she covered her mouth with her hands. I can't believe I quit. Michelle laughed and rose up from her chair. Vacation Day 1. Chapter 32. Standing outside Diana's apartment building later that night, Eli's knuckles itched for the beating he was going to give Lewis. He needed to release this fire he couldn't shake. Even on his walk over here, Eli thought he smelled Rose's scent on the wind and flipped around in frantic circles searching to find her. It was getting ridiculous. He'd had an early dinner with Darek just to get out of Michelle's house because he couldn't keep his hands off those Torn panties. Dark had asked him about 5 times. What's wrong with you? Before he finally answered, just a woman. It's nothing. Looking doubtful, Dark dropped it, happy to talk about a movie he just found on Netflix called City Island, one of the coolest films he'd seen in a long time. Totally unpredictable. Eli kept him on his favorite conversation, of course by asking questions about the film. For a little while that helped keep his and his packmates' mind off what he personally was going through, which was hell. Absolute fucking hell. He stared up at the building muttering, and all because Michelle forgot her phone. I could just... A text bit off the rest of his sentence and he pulled out his own phone. Speak of the devil. The text read, Hey Eli. It's Michelle. Listen, I wanted to give you Rose's number, just in case. He stared at the smiley face she'd diabolically left after Rose's digits. Was laughing at him. He read the numbers over and over until he began to say them aloud. 212-585. Footsteps approached. Peering out from where he stood in the shadows, Eli spotted an older gentleman. In an Irish cap and jacket, brown pants, boots, and wearing glasses so thick his wrinkles looked like mountain formations and his eyes looked like a bug's. He walked up the 3 steps to the small apartment building stairs. Blind as a bat. Perfect. Oh good. I locked myself out, Eli said, running up to join him. Startled, the man turned, but with his years the movement wasn't quick. He blinked at Eli's smile and relaxed. Oh, how are you tonight, young man? I'm great. Good to see you again. When do you think it's going to snow? Eli held the door and watched the old man go in. Well, I don't know, but I sure am enjoying this weather. Let's not rush it. Okay. He ambled to the apartment on the left before the stairs began playing with his keys. You have a good night. Eli kept his smile friendly and tipped an invisible hat. You too. He headed up the stairs like he lived there. You're on the 3rd floor, right? Do you have bed bugs? Eli whipped around halfway up the worn steps. I am, and no sir, I don't. Do you? The old man shook his head, sneering. Foul things. Of course I don't. But I heard a rumor they were getting around. Chuckling, Eli assured him. I promise to tell you if I get them, but I will be very careful not to. The old man said, air, and closed his door. The lock turned. Eli slowed down, climbing carefully up to level 3, his wolf at the ready, ears cocked. Outside Diana's apartment he stood very still. Dontae had recommended a few days wait, but he couldn't do that. He needed to keep from sniffing around every apartment building in the financial district looking for Rose. But now that he had her number in that text, the itch to call her pulled at him like a heroin addiction. He channeled all the obsessive energy to Diana's paint chip door. He heard voices, but of 2 women. Diana had a friend over and there were only 2 heartbeats, so Lewis wasn't inside. Eli considered waiting. It would give him something healthy to focus on and, hopefully for the whole night. There were only 2 apartments on each floor. 6 total. He walked to the other door on this level and heard a TV set playing inside. 1 heartbeat, its owner snoring. Eli sat down on the torn carpet and waited. He stayed there a long time, staring into nothing, blissfully grateful his brain was quiet. It was like a meditation retreat compared to how his day had been. A crash from Diana's apartment startled him. Then a woman shouted, What's this? You've been looking up shelters? What are you looking up shelters for? A loud crack sounded that Eli knew from experience was a slap with some power behind it. He jumped off the floor, staring at the door mystified. Diana's voice came muffled through the door. I was looking them up for a friend. You're going to leave me? Another violent crack, this time much louder. Stop please, Louise, stop it. Oh shit, Louise. He gaped at the closed door, stunned. He couldn't beat up a woman no matter how much of an abusive bitch she might be. Then he heard the horrible, distinctive sound of Diana crawling backwards on a hardwood floor to get away. He closed his eyes in agony. I don't want to leave you. I love you, Louise. Please. If you loved me, you wouldn't be scaring me like this now, would you? Huh. Diana cried out as a dull noise that sounded like a kick reached Eli. Would you? Eli tore the door off the hinges, his rage unleashed. Diana cowered from her lover on the floor under their desk, and Louise, a blonde woman who looked like she'd be comfortable on the front of a Harley, turned with surprise. Eli growled, Back away from her, Louise. Get the fuck away. Now. Diana's eyes went wide with recognition, but Louise recovered from her shock quickly and snarled at him. Who the fuck are you? She looked at Diana. Who's your knight in shining armor? Have you been cheating on me with a man? No. No, I haven't cheated on you. Diana pleaded. She looked at him. Tell her. Tell her we don't know each other. Eli moved so fast that both women flinched. He grabbed Louise and turned her upside down, lifting her off the ground as though she weighed as much as the empty envelope lying on the desk behind her. Her hair and arms hung down, not touching the floor. His voice was an animalistic growl that gave both women goosebumps. You are leaving tonight, and you're never coming back. Do you understand? He could feel Louise get clammy, could smell her fear. Do you understand? She nodded. Yeah. He shook her around and tossed her onto the floor like he was throwing away trash. Get your things. Go. He stood between Diana, who was sobbing, and Louise, who was not. I'm sorry, Louise, she whispered. Eli hated when he heard victims defending or apologizing to their abusers. But that was how it worked. There is no abuser if there is no victim. One cannot exist without the other. Louise shot Diana a hateful look, and he knew this wasn't the last of it. He could make her leave, but she'd be back. It made his soul hurt, and he gritted his teeth to growl. That's enough. Louise picked up some clothes and a jacket, ignoring him and moving slow. She turned and faced him, cocking her chin with defiance. Unleashing his restraint, he used all of his supernatural speed, appearing inches in front of her terrified face with his eyes in full shift glow. He growled at her, his chest rumbling so thoroughly it vibrated hers too. Urine rushed down her leg, and she ran out, clambering down the stairs. As soon as he gathered himself and knew his eyes were back to their normal, human-like color, he turned and dipped to his knees to be at her level. Diana, are you okay? Holding one of the desk legs, she had tears streaming down her old bruises, and her cheek was red from the slap. I'm fine. I heard her kick you. Is anything broken? He couldn't smell blood, but only she would know if something was internally damaged, like a rib. She sniffled and shook her head. No. You want to come out? Climbing out and using the desk to steady herself, she was scared for so many reasons. He hated that he was probably one of them, but maybe witnessing the little bit of supernatural power would be enough to shock her into doing something different. It was all he could hope for, knowing that Louise would be back once she'd cleaned her pants, and she'd be furious. You have some place you can go? She thought about it. I have a friend from work. That day he'd copied the list of shelters out from his phone by hand, and he handed it to her now. These are those places we talked about. They don't judge. They only help. He walked the paper to her. I'm sorry I scared you. You can trust me. I know you might not believe that right now. No, I do, she whispered, taking the list. Thank you. He sighed, looking at the red mark on her tear-drenched cheek. I know you love her, I can see it. But this isn't what love has to be like. There are no shoulds. I'm not saying you should, understand? She nodded. I'm saying it's a choice. You're making a choice. She is making a choice. And you can make another one if you want to badly enough. Okay, she nodded. He felt deflated and impotent to help. He couldn't force her to choose a better life. Then he remembered Rose's number. Listen, Diana, give me that paper a sec. She handed it to him. You got a pen? She nodded and reached for one on the desk. Thanks. He used his leg to write the already memorized number on. This is a female lawyer. She'll help you if you decide to prosecute. You can trust her too. He handed the paper back. Just hold on to it, okay? I can't afford a lawyer, she said, her eyes hopeless. He threw up his hands in a prayer position. I'll pay for it. You call that number? He pointed at the paper in her hand. I will cover the cost. I have the money. I want to. She stared at him. Why are you doing this? He gave her a big smile. It makes me feel good. But only if you use that number, you understand? I won't feel good if you don't. She nodded, but regardless of his trying to coax one out of her, she couldn't return the smile. He waited until she got her things together and called her friend. It was in the neighborhood, and he insisted on walking her there, happy when she was relieved. She put on her coat and grabbed her black suitcase. Glancing at the broken door, she walked out with him behind her. Let me get that. He picked up the suitcase and she studied his ability to lift such a heavy thing without signs of strain. They walked the chilly streets into the night together, Eli keeping an ear out for Louise to ensure she wasn't following them. He kept Diana's mind occupied with light and friendly conversation about his run through the park that day, how he'd gotten a hot dog and then another one. He even shared with her that he'd recently moved too and was enjoying the change. Diana listened, but she was still in shock about what was happening. When they arrived at her coworker's brownstone apartment, she was waiting on the steps in her pajamas. With kind eyes and a warm hug, she greeted her friend and thanked Eli with a silent smile, guiding Diana upstairs. Before they went into the building, Diana waved to him. He waved back and waited until they were both safely inside. For 2 hours he remained there, keeping watch in case Louise showed up. She might know about this place, might have come here for a dinner one night. He couldn't be sure. It wasn't up to him after all. He could only do so much. But for tonight at least he could make sure Diana was protected. After 1 in the morning, when the lights were long out upstairs, he headed home feeling he'd done the best he could do, knowing it wasn't enough. Chapter 33. Just after 11 on Saturday morning, Rose rolled over and stared at the ceiling, feeling like she'd caught up on 3 adrenaline-filled years of sleep. She stretched her body under the covers and snuggled with them, bunching them around her and smiling toward the window. The pale blue curtains were halfway open and the sky outside looked overcast but bright. Having spent a good part of yesterday with Michelle drinking and then ditching the booze to shop for new sweaters, she felt loved. The kind of loved you feel when you spend time with a friend who gets you. They'd separated in time for Rose to come home and send the company laptop and all her files by courier back to Hewlett, Leonard and Clarkson as promised. Then she happily binge-watched her favorite TV shows, The Walking Dead and Jane the Virgin, sticking her head in the sand so she didn't obsess over what Eli and Michelle were hiding. Staring out the bedroom window, she gave some thought to what she should do today. With no job, there was no schedule of pressing problems, no witnesses to set up with interviews, no cases, no money coming in. She sat up and stared as images of poverty and destitution flashed before her. Way too ambitious eyes. Oh my God, I've got no clients. Am I even a lawyer anymore? Throwing off the comforter, she paced around her apartment making a plan. First she'd need her own laptop and maybe a tablet, then a website. Or maybe website first and then wait, no, she needed a laptop to set up the website. Also, what would her company name be? And how am I going to get clients? Anxiety drove her into her kitchen where she searched for coffee. If she were going to build a whole online profile in one day, she'd need brain juice. The canister was empty. She shook it. Great. At Bluestone Lane Coffee, the line was manageable, but it wasn't moving fast enough for her. She tapped her foot while her mind made big plans, spinning in circles about how to make a website. She could hire someone, but would they work fast enough? She wanted the damn thing up today. Digging in her bag for her purse, she heard a male voice say, "Why the frown on a Saturday? Don't tell me you're working on the weekend." She glanced up and saw a nice-looking man with dirty blonde hair and blue eyes. He had no accent, but with those features and that smile, she'd bet money his family descended from Ireland. He had a nice face. "I'm starting my own business today, so I guess I am working." He gave a playful frown. "I don't like the idea of anyone working today when winter is just around the corner. Plenty of time to stay indoors then, don't ya think?" She laughed with an agreeing shrug. "Yes, true, but I'm going to do it anyway." He smiled and turned back around. Giving his trim shape a once-over, she pulled out her phone to call Michelle about internet stuff when he turned back around and asked, "Well, how about tonight? Let me take you out to dinner after you're done building your empire." His eyebrows rose in expectation of a positive reply. Her smile turned into a grin and she slipped her phone back in her purse. "That would be nice." "Yeah?" he asked, grinning now too. He didn't have a dimple, but his laugh lines were contagious. He seemed kind. "I'm Rose. Danny." He held out his hand. She shook it and quickly let it go. "What do you do, Danny?" They both moved up as the line got shorter. "I'm a contractor. Foreman of a team of really good men. We build things." He smiled with comical pride. She gave him the smile he wanted. That's really cool. And here I was going to drink coffee at home. A text came through on her phone and she reacted to the familiar beep telling him, "Excuse me a sec." "No prob." Her smile vanished as she saw an unfamiliar number and read the text. "Rose. It's Eli. There's a woman who's being abused by her partner. I gave her your number just in case she decides to prosecute and needs the help of a great lawyer. I am hoping she'll call. If she does, please bill me. I'm taking care of it. And I'm sorry about the other night." She stared at the text. "Bad news?" Danny asked. She saw him glancing at the phone and shoved it into her purse. "A referral?" "Possibly. Good news." "You don't look like it's good news." She made a small noise that shrugged off any more questions and they both stepped forward as he became the next person in line. "Can I get your coffee?" "For you." She smiled and thanked him, but she was no longer in the room, her mind on Eli's text and what it meant. He was going to pay fees for a woman in a bad situation. That was so noble she had a hard time believing it true. It was another reminder that she didn't really know him, but it made her want to, which sucked, and his timing was uncanny. Right after she'd been asked out by an attractive guy, he texts her? After giving Danny her number, settling on when they would meet and where, she thanked him again for the double Americano and declined his offer to walk with her. She had too much on her mind, she told him. She really wanted to call Eli. Instead, she settled on Michelle. Glancing around, she made sure Danny was out of sight and earshot before she dug out her phone and dialed. "Hey Rosie, hungover?" Rose answered on a wry smile. "We didn't have enough to get hungover." "Wait. Are you?" "No. I was just joking." "What are you guys up to?" Rose looked up at the cloud cover, wondering what she was going to ask and how to phrase it. Eli had her number. How'd he get it? What did he say? Anything about her? Did Michelle still think she shut off her mind and listened? "We're discussing a honeymoon. Your vacation talk got me wanting to get away. To a beach too." Rose heard Nathaniel's voice in the background. "Thank her. For me." Michelle laughed. "Nathaniel's happy. I think he wants to see me in a bikini." Rose was dying with questions, so her laugh sounded fake. "That's great. Well, my vacation is put on hold. I need some help, Shell. I want to build a website today for my practice." Without missing a beat, Michelle said, "Wix. They're drag and drop and their templates are fantastic. You could have it up by tonight, easy." Rose blew through the tiny hole in her coffee lid to cool it down, her red sneakers stopping. "Awesome. And do you know anything about this woman Eli is helping? I got a text from him that he's referred me to her." "A battered woman? Do you know who she is?" "He said her partner, so I'm not sure if that means she's gay or just not exactly married." Michelle was quiet and Rose thought she heard her cover the phone but wasn't sure. She waited until she heard, "I don't know anything about it, but Nathaniel says the guys, his friends you met at the wedding, they like to help people in need. So it must be that." Rose heard it again, just like yesterday. Michelle way too careful with her words. "I see. Does he know this woman?" "How did?" Interrupting, Michelle said quickly, "I don't know, Rosie. Why don't you ask him?" With a single snort, Rose shot that down immediately. "He's probably just telling me this to make up for the other night." As soon as the words fell out of her mouth, she regretted it. "What happened the other night?" Michelle asked with surprise. "Did something happen and you didn't tell me? How long did we spend together yesterday and you didn't tell me something happened with you and Eli? Oh please, like you're so forthcoming." Gritting her teeth, she moved closer to the building she stood by and started kicking it. "We kind of exploded. I have to stay away from that man. He is bad for my sanity, and that's all I'm going to say." "You're going to say more than that." "No, I'm really not." She sipped her coffee and burned her tongue. "Ow, fuck. And besides, I have a date tonight. A very attractive man named Danny is taking me to Gotham tonight, which I hear is incredible, so Eli can kiss my ass." She heard Michelle ask her husband, "Did you know something happened between Eli and Rose?" A pause, then, "Why didn't you tell me? What did he say?" Her eagerness was embarrassing. She cleared her throat. "I mean, whatever. It's fine." On an exasperated sigh, Michelle answered, "He says there's a guy code." "Well, get it out of him." If you knew him better, you'd know that's not possible. Those four are thick. Directing her next words to both Nathaniel and Rose, she added, thick as thieves and thick-headed. Art. Don't. She burst out laughing, obviously being playfully attacked. Rose called over her friend's laugher. Okay, I'll let you go. Wix. I'll try. And about Eli, let's just drop it. I don't need to know what he said about me. I already know what I have to do. Which is. A bird landed on a trash can in front of Rose. They watched each other as she said, go out with someone who is available, and that ain't Eli. Guys like him are dangerous. Michelle told Nathaniel, hang on, and asked Rose in an urgent voice, so, you're going out with this guy Danny? Yep. But first my empire. The bird lifted his wings and flew away. She smiled. I'll talk to you later, Shell. Bye, Rosie. Chapter 34. Eli stared at the phone waiting for Rose to reply. The TV was on TNT and a repeat of Supernatural had been amusing him to no end. Until now. You're not going to even answer my text? He muttered, his hand on the soft cotton of his t-shirt. He meant to sleep in that day since it was the weekend. And their firm was closed. A wolf's hours are in the night, and day sleeping was natural. He and his packmates indulged themselves at least twice a week. And today was supposed to be one of those days, but he dreamed of Rose all night and woke with a heart-on that wouldn't quit. He wouldn't let himself fantasize about her because it would only feed the beast. He'd stupidly thought texting was a good idea since he had to tell her about Diana in case she called. But he realized with each passing second he waited for a reply that it was the worst thing he could have done. The obsession he'd abetted was now in full swing. Jumping off the couch, he paced around Michelle's old apartment, grabbed the remote and powered off the show. For the billionth time, he snatched up Rose's panties and breathed them in. Throwing them to the couch, he grabbed onto a wall and cracked his neck. Stop it. Anxious and irritated, he blinked at the furniture. That's what I'll do. I'll throw out all this stuff and go buy my own things. He dialed Darek and as soon as he picked up demanded, you want to help me get furniture for my new place? Darek didn't hesitate. Fuck yeah. Nathaniel and Dontae coming. You want to give Dontae a call while I phone my ex-roomie? Sure. Then text me where we should meet. You got it. They hung up and Eli's mood improved. You've gotta have friends, he mumbled as he dialed. His best friend answered on the first ring. Hey, we're going shopping for couches and tables and stuff. Wanna come? Just like with Darek, the answer was immediate. Count me in. To Michelle, who must have been right beside him, he said, the guys are going to get new stuff for your old place. Do you want to keep any of it? What shouldn't we throw away? Eli loved how quickly Nathaniel took care of business and waited while they discussed. She asked if she could come by while they were out shopping and grab some things, but the major furniture items she didn't need. Nathaniel came back to say, you heard that, right? Knowing with their hearing abilities Eli had. Yup. Tell her to have at it. Whatever she needs. Oh man, this is gonna be good. I can't wait. Don't tell her this, but I'm crawling out of my skin over here. It's about that thing we talked about. I don't even want to say her name. Michelle's voice in the background changed as she reminded her new husband. Tell him about tonight. Nathaniel paused, torn between both conversations. Do you have dinner plans? He could hear hesitancy in his friend's tone, so he said with caution, no. Why? Michelle wants to go to Gotham, hasn't been before. She wants you to come. Just me? Eli asked with surprise. What's going on? No, not just you. D&D too. Eli relaxed. So why the tone? It sounded like you didn't want to ask me. Nathaniel paused again. No. I wanted to ask you. That's why I did. Eli frowned. Okay. Well, yeah, I'll want to eat after we buy all my new stuff. He laughed, eager for something to occupy his mind with. Let's do this. Text me where we're starting. He hung up. Tossing the phone on the couch that would soon no longer be there, Eli clapped his hands once and headed for his jacket. Where to begin, where to begin? Then he remembered the text, and like a gnat buzzing around his head, he couldn't ignore his desire to go check once more. He rushed back for the phone, picked it, and saw no response from Rose. What the fuck? He threw the phone and shattered the screen. Oh no. Chapter 35. Even though Danny had offered to pick her up in a cab, Rose turned him down, knowing full well that if this went badly, she didn't want him knowing where she slept at night. He seemed completely sane but can't be too careful. He was waiting in the bar for her when she arrived at Gotham in her blue V-neck dress that fell to the middle of her thighs and flowed when she walked. It looked like it might rain later, so she'd broken out last season's trench coat black to match her shoes. As she arrived in front of him, she slipped it off her shoulders and he gave her the once-over. "You look beautiful." She smiled and threw the coat over her arm, glancing to find him in a forest green sweater and black slacks. It was a little too future husband-wife for her. She would have preferred a suit. "What are you drinking?" "Oh, water." She blinked at him, not sure what to do. "Well, let's go to our table." He offered his arm and she took it, pleased to feel strong muscles tightening. He smelled good too. Not as sexy as Eli had, more subtle. "Did you build your empire?" She laughed as they walked to the hostess stand. "I researched other law practices all day to find out what I liked and didn't like about their sites. That took longer than I thought it would." An Asian brunette with long straight hair glanced up from a floor chart and nodded as he gave his name. "Right this way," she smiled, leading them into the romantically lit dining room. Danny motioned for Rose to go first. She knew he was probably checking her out, and for the first time ever, she didn't sway her hips, knowing that it was occurring to her she didn't really want to be here, but with Eli having chosen not to go out with her, she needed to get her mind off of him. Only Danny seemed like a decent guy, and she was starting to feel like a jerk for using him. "Here you are," the hostess said, removing 2 of the settings and leaving 2 behind. Danny held her chair for her. "Thank you." She offered him a distracted smile. He grinned as he sat down. "My mom taught me to always treat a lady like a queen." The impression of his mother included an accent that made him all the more charming. Her thoughts of Eli swept aside momentarily. "I thought you must be Irish. Is she first-generation American?" "Second." Light accent still there, just enough to make me want to call her more just to listen to her voice. The crinkles by his eyes appeared as his blue eyes danced. She'd guess him to be 32 or 3, but those smile lines were here to stay. That only meant one thing: he was a naturally happy person, and Rose couldn't help but like that. She picked up the wine list, glancing to him. "I think I'll order a glass." He motioned for her to go ahead. "Please. I want you to have whatever you want." He called over their server and ordered her Pinot Grigio for her, and asked for a large sparkling water as well, with 2 glasses. As the man left, Danny turned back to her and said, "I'm glad you came out tonight." She smiled. "Me too. What did you find out about the websites? What didn't you like?" Sliding her cloth napkin onto her lap. "Well, there are a lot of really boring sites that don't seem modern, like they were thrown up there without a care a decade ago." He chuckled. "I bet. I did get a new laptop though. I have to get a tablet still, but I don't know what to get. Gigabytes and all that stuff boggles my mind. I'm going to research them first." "You want me to explain them?" She thought about it and grinned. "No. I think I want to finally learn, since I'm on my own now. I'm hungry. Do you want to order an appetizer?" He picked up the menu. "Sure. Let's see what they have." Admiring the white columns and large flower arrangements while she played with her napkin, her glance made its way to the door. What she saw there made her mouth go dry. She swallowed, not able to believe her eyes. She heard him saying, "Oh, they have calamari." Eli, Nathaniel, Dontae and Derek, all in expensive suits, stood by the hostess stand like they owned the place and everyone in it. Her eyes locked with her Judas best friend, who was staring right at her. "Motherfucker," Rose muttered. Danny looked up. "What?" Rose flew back to him and shook her nervous head. "Did I say that out loud?" "I'm sorry. I just remembered I didn't lock my front door." His eyebrows flew up. "Do you live in a small building?" "No. It's a high-rise," he concluded. "Oh, well, then the likelihood of someone trying your door over the next 2 hours. Right. Yeah, I'm sure no one will. It's just that's why I swore like a trucker." "Sorry." She glanced to her menu. "So, do you know what you're having?" "There's no rush," he smiled. "And you forget I work with men all day. I've had to hold back 4 swear words since you got here." She nodded, unable to laugh, sweat beading between her breasts. Wishing they weren't so prominently displayed with this table, she decided the only thing to do was what any smart woman would: look like she was having the time of her Life. She straightened up her spine, picked up her menu, put on her most winning smile and said, "Oh, you're right. They do have calamari. I love that. Let's get it." He grinned. "Yeah? Great. I'll tell him when he comes back." His smile became more intimate and he held his arm toward her, laying it on the white linen tablecloth with his palm up, waiting. "You really look beautiful tonight." She smiled and felt her veins flex with anxiety as she put her hand on his. "That's very sweet. Thank you." Danny's face changed and he looked up. She could feel the presence of someone walking to them. Heat raced up her right side as the person got closer. She didn't have to look to know it wasn't the waiter. She withdrew her hand like a shot and turned to see Eli looming above her with fiery amber eyes. He looked so much taller and foreboding standing over her like that. His suit was impeccable, but he looked like he was about to shatter it, his muscles tense and ready to fight. His fists were white and he wouldn't look at Danny. "Rose." "Eli," she answered, her voice cold. "You didn't answer my text. And is it any wonder?" They glared at each other, forgetting there was anyone else in the room. She watched his jaw tick 4 times before he growled, "Nice dress." "Thank you. Would you like to join us?" He jerked his chin toward the booth his friends stood by. Rose glanced to them quickly, then back to him without moving her head. Only Michelle was sitting down, and from the look on her face she'd been told to. "You can see I'm on a date." He exhaled slowly through his nose and she heard his knuckles crack. She glanced to them. "Eli, calm down," she said carefully. He stared at her and said through gritted teeth, "I'm trying." She rose up just as the waiter returned with her white wine, glancing between the 3 faces with curiosity. "I'm sorry, Danny." She met his eyes. "I can't do this." "I get it," he muttered, holding up his hands. She grabbed her coat and purse. "I'm so sorry," she mumbled, rushing past Eli and toward the hostess stand. She shot a look to Michelle and caught her friend's horrors. Rose mouthed, "What the hell?" Shell tried to get out of the booth, but Nathaniel held out his hand to stop her. That's how Rose knew that Eli was right behind her. She broke into a run, bursting through the front door and out onto East 12th Street. The Greenwich Village sidewalk was full of people grouped in 2s, 3s and 4s, all out for a great Saturday night. She ducked and weaved through the crowd with him on her heels. Catching up quickly, he rushed in front of her and ran backwards. "Rose, stop." She tried to get around him, but he zigzagged with her, interpreting her every move. "Eli, leave me alone." Gasping for air, she bent over. "My heart's going to explode." "I know. I can hear it. You have to slow down." With her coat and purse in her arms, her hands over her slamming heart, she blinked at him. "What do you mean you can hear it? What the fuck are you?" He swore at himself under his breath. "I meant I can tell." "Of course it is. You're upset." "That's what I meant." Her blue eyes narrowed on him and she shook her head, struggling for breath. "More lies. Look, I didn't know you were going to be there. Took me by surprise. I'm sorry for what I just did. I couldn't stop myself." "Fuck," he shouted, spinning in a circle and coming back to her, saying with great control, "Rose, when I saw you holding that guy's hand, I lost it. I fucking lost it. I'm just glad you ran out of there when you did, or what? Or what, Eli? I would have had a good time with a man who actually wants to date me, or wanted to. Past tense. He sure as hell doesn't want to see me again." Eli's jaw ticked. "I'm sorry." He grabbed her face and stared into her eyes, saying in a thick, low voice that was so earnest and eager for her to understand it shocked her, "I want to explain. Believe me when I look at you. I want nothing more than to explain why I've been acting like such an idiot. Want to wipe that frown off your face forever. And tell you things I've never told anyone. I want to, Rose. But I just can't." "Yes, you can." Eli released her and looked up. Rose turned around and saw the whole group standing behind her. Michelle had a look on her face Rose couldn't read. Dark. And Dontae, who she barely knew, looked gravely at her like a decision had been made. It was Nathaniel who had spoken, and his green eyes were saying all kinds of things to Eli that only they could understand. "You can tell her." She looked at Eli and watched his face change like a huge weight was at once lifted and dropped on him at the same time. "She's not ready." "She can handle it," Michelle told him. "I can handle what?" Rose demanded. She pointed at her best friend. I knew. You've been keeping something from me. Is this it? Michelle's face had never been more somber. It was a little frightening and it quieted Rose's anger. Can I handle it, Shell? Michelle nodded and looked at Eli. She can. You can trust her. I trust her. With my life. Even if she rejects you, she'll never tell anyone. Rose whipped around. Eli's soulful brown eyes were flitting around. You're sure, guys. Rose looked to see his three friends nod as if they were a single entity. He held his hand out. Walk with me. Rose nodded and slipped her hand into his, frustrated at how good it felt for his fingers to entwine with hers again. I can't believe I'm even talking to you after what you pulled the other night. Just like 2 nights ago, they didn't talk as the buildings passed by. His presence beside her felt protective. Wherever they walked, people moved out of their way. Glancing to his profile, she saw him lost in his thoughts. She squeezed his hand and walked closer to him, holding onto his arm. He glanced down and offered her a distant smile. You want to put on your coat? She shook her head. You're keeping me warm. Your body is. I run hot, he murmured, smiling as though at an inside joke. Stopping, he faced her, then glanced around to make sure no one could hear. Rose, what if I told you that you are right, that I'm not human? Chapter 36. Eli waited for her to say something and saw thoughts flying through her mind, evidenced by her changing expressions. He let his wolf out a little this time, purposefully allowing his eyes to glow brightly. Her breath hitched as she gazed at them. What are you? She whispered. I'm someone who can't stop thinking about you. He pulled her along and walked for another block, feeling her cling to him as they paid no attention to their surroundings. He stopped and pulled her close, without warning, leaning down to kiss her. She responded as his mouth searched for permission to tell her everything, moving with her like they were made for each other. Crushing her to him in a desperate embrace, he wondered at how good she felt, at how much being with her relieved that itch haunting him since he'd seen her last. Their kiss escalated and he let her go, gasping for air. His wolf wanted more and he wanted it badly, but Eli had images of wedding rings in his head. Fuck. Rose stared at him, scanning his expression to read what was going on. Don't you dare, she whispered. Don't you dare do this to me again, Eli. He grabbed her hand and led her up the street again, swearing aloud at the tornado of emotions ripping him in two. Back there in the restaurant, he was going to tear that guy to shreds. When they'd arrived, he hadn't seen Rose at first, but then he smelled her. He fucking smelled her scent by the hostess desk and, searching the room, saw her smiling and flirting with some bastard in a green sweater. A green sweater? Really? The guy had future husband written all over him and Eli went nuts. Nathaniel had told him to calm down. Dontae had growled. Don't tell me we've lost another one, and Dark asked the hostess. Can we have a table far away from that one over there? Michelle whispered. Oh my God, I'm sorry. I just had to try. Is he going to fight the guy? Nathaniel assured her. Eli can control himself. That's when he'd advanced on the table, with those words at his back. Walking up the street with her hand squished in his, he began talking to himself like a lunatic who's trying to figure out how to avoid the apocalypse. Eli can control himself. See, that's the thing. I can. Except when it comes to you. He was walking so fast she was jogging to keep up and she kept quiet, listening as he worked it out. When it comes to you, my eyes are glowing when I don't know it. I can't stop smelling those damn panties you left behind. I was going to shred that guy. I could taste it. I could taste his blood, and I was going to do it if you hadn't run out. When we were at that speakeasy, all I wanted to do was pay them to shut it down so I could be alone with you. I have never been as haunted by a woman as I am by you. He turned and grabbed her face, making her cheeks go chipmunk. I don't want to get married. Do you understand? I don't want to put a ring on your finger and fuck you as my wife. Do you hear me? She started to cry. I don't want to fall in love with you, but my wolf knows that's where I'm going. But I don't want it. Do you hear me, Rose? He crushed his lips to hers, her tears wetting his cheeks as he embraced her and kissed her deeply. He worked rough kisses to her ear and down her neck, repeating her name over and over with gasping breaths. She pulled away and forced him to look at her. She was blushing and her blue eyes were liquid with fresh tears. All the anger and resistance was gone from her as she said gently, "Hey, hey, hey, listen. Slow down. Who said anything about getting married? I just met you. I'm not Michelle. How about we go on a date first? Where do you want to go? I'm hungry. How about you?" She blinked and chuckled lightly, laying her hands on his hips. "Now? You're going to bogart my date with Danny." His wolf thrashed violently at the sound of his name. "Don't bring him up. Again. Not tonight." She nodded. "I was making a joke, but I can see it's not a joking matter. How about I never bring him up? Is that better?" He nodded and she smiled. "I'm hungry too." Off his look, she laughed like an innocent girl. "For food." He threw his head back on a laugh and grabbed her hand again. "Then let's get dinner. I could eat Florida right now." The city moved steadily by them, though neither was aware of it. After a few blocks he asked, "You like Indian?" glancing down to hear her answer. Eli. Yeah. What did you mean when you said your wolf is?" She bit her lip and stopped. "I've never told anyone this before, so I don't know how to say it." She tugged on his hand for him to stop walking. "What if I guess it?" "Don't laugh at me if I'm wrong, okay?" He didn't return her nervous smile. "I promise not to laugh. Are you an angel?" He laughed. She hit him on the chest, stifling a grin that was half amused, half angry. "You promised." He couldn't stop smiling. "I am no angel." He burst out laughing again and she hit again, harder this time. "You can't hurt me, woman." She smacked his chest a third and final time and he grabbed her hand and held it, leaning down until he was an inch from her lips. He could feel the heat of her breath, could smell the sweetness of it, her natural breath turning him on. "I'm your soulmate," he teased, though there was truth behind the words. They both felt. "Eli," she breathed, eyelids heavy. "What are you?" "I'm a wolf." She searched him and he nodded just enough that their lips brushed each other. "I'm a wolf. There is a wolf inside this man, a wolf who has claimed you as his own. I would have taken longer, but it's done. He has to have you. I have to have you." Her breath hitched. "Are you a?" She glanced around to make sure they were alone. He knew they were. He had been listening very closely. "Are you a werewolf?" Her light brown eyebrows rose. Bracing himself for her to run from him, he nodded slowly. She stayed where she was, which was a miracle to him. He blinked and took a deep breath, explaining, "But we're not like in the horror films. We're not ruled by the moon and I can't turn you. You don't have to be afraid." Her heart had picked up speed. We're not? Do you mean Nathaniel? Dontae? Darek?" He didn't nod. He didn't have to. From the look in her eyes, she already knew. It felt so strange to tell their most well-kept secret to someone outside their pack, and he couldn't help wondering how Nathaniel did. "That makes so much sense. The four of you, when you're together, you're so powerful." When he was younger he had taken pride in it, but now that he was almost 30 it was a part of life, but hearing her point it out, it made him think of his friends. They'd given him this gift tonight and had sacrificed themselves in the process in a way. His bond to them deepened. "They are my brothers. And Rose, you can't ever tell anyone what we've shared with you." Rose made a face as if that were foolish of him to even say it. "That's what Michelle has been hiding from me. She knows, doesn't she? You can understand why she couldn't tell you." On a slow nod, a series of questions tumbled from her. "How many people know? Have you always been this way? Your body, it's so strong, do have supernatural powers? The woman you gave my number to, how do you know her?" Michelle said, "You like to help people." Did she mean you guys are superheroes or something? He grinned, humbled. "You're so smart, Rose. That mind of yours won't let up until I tell you everything, will it?" She smiled. "I love that you get me." He kissed her. "Let's talk over dinner. How about burgers? This place look good." He pointed to Bear Burger, a restaurant just up from where they stood on LaGuardia Place. He was starving now that they weren't fighting anymore. "It's perfect. French fries and burgers are perfect. Let's go." He led her there and opened the door for her. She made a beeline for a corner, pale green booth and sat down without ceremony. He joined her and glanced around the casual environment. They were the most dressed up of anybody there. A female server headed over and Eli and Rose ordered quickly. He got the boar burger and she beef burger with bacon and cheese. He loved that she didn't order salad, And when he asked if she wanted a shake, she looked at him like he was an idiot for having to ask. 2 chocolate shakes, please. Thanks. And I'll give you a $50 tip if you keep these 2 tables empty. He pointed to the booth behind them and the table to their right. The server was surprised but offered. I could get reserve signs? Perfect. He flashed his dimple. She flushed and disappeared. Keeping his voice low, he leaned across the table. Rose met him in the middle. Like 2 people drinking from the same glass with 2 straws. He had her full and undivided attention, so he began in a voice so quiet only she could hear. I was born this way and my family was too. My mother passed away years ago. And my father still lives in the woods. He never took a new mate. We lived there up until about 5 or 6 years ago. Wait. He stopped and tried to recall. Is it longer than that? Shaking his head, he muttered. I'm not sure. Dark's better with that stuff. Anyway, it was some years ago. We were friends but not as close as we are now. Nathaniel and I have been like brothers since we met 11 years ago. I remember that date well because I'd just turned 18. She nodded slowly, soaking in every detail. It felt good to have her so interested and, to be honest, for maybe the first time outside of when he was with his pack. Her eyes were so sharp he knew she wasn't missing any of this, which meant a lot since it was his life he was talking about. We moved to New York when Dontae said he wanted more than the woods. I think I'd felt that way for a long time but hadn't voiced it until he brought it up. Nathaniel jumped on it. He broke the straw for me and Darek. Was good to go at about the same time. We told our pack. That's what we call them. And most didn't understand. But we live a free life and so no one stopped us. Do you go back there? To Maine? Sometimes. Not as much anymore. We love it here. You know, we design buildings now, right? She nodded. There's something in a man's DNA that makes building something from the ground up extremely fulfilling. And to abate our missing the forest, we use eco-friendly materials and as much stone and wood as we can. It's a balance, but we do our best. She smiled. I'm so excited. Thank you for telling me this. It was like a weight he didn't know he was carrying had suddenly disappeared. As they ate their burgers and fries, they talked. Eli described about Darek, how he was different and therefore special. His blue eyes gave him away to his kind, but to humanity, he fit right in since he'd started out as one of them. Eli scraped his lettuce off as he added, but Dontae's the powerhouse. We don't have a pack leader, but if we did, he'd want it to be him. A rueful smile lit him up at the thought. Yeah, he'd love that. Rose smiled, chewing a French fry and picking up her shake to swallow it down. Would you like to go to Tahiti with me? He just stuffed a big bite of rare boar meat into his mouth, so all he could do was nod and hit the table, trying to chew fast. She laughed as he spoke, through half a mouthful. Fuck yeah. When? She sipped on her straw, acting innocent. Tomorrow. Her eyes twinkled and she laughed. I quit my job yesterday. I start my own practice soon, but I haven't had a vacation in. She paused, thinking about it. I don't think I've taken a vacation since I graduated from law school. Oh, that's horrible. He reached over and touched her hand. Let's go. Really? She yelped. Oh my God, I just squealed. I don't squeal. But really. Let's go. Hang on. He pulled out his phone, calling Nathaniel, who picked up after the second ring. What took you so long? I had to get the phone out of my pocket. How'd it go? Where are you? I told you those pants are too tight, Eli joked. Well, it's going really well. He shared a smile with Rose, holding her eyes as he asked, Can you guys cover for me at work? Tomorrow's Sunday. I know, but I'm going to Tahiti for just a few days, she whispered. A week. She jumped around her chair, freaking out with excitement as he grinned into the phone. Rose and I are going to get to know each other. Nathaniel laughed and told the others, they're going to Tahiti. Dontae's voice was stern. Tahiti is 16 hours away. How do you know that? Dark asked. Never mind. Nathaniel asked. You hear that? Yeah. Eli leaned in to tell Rose the bad news. Tahiti 16 hours away. She blanched. Yeah, how about the Bahamas? More chair jumping, and she covered her mouth so as not to squeal for the second time. You'll need a passport, Nathaniel reminded him. He's got one from when he went to London for that British chick, Dark said. Eli didn't share that forgettable fact with Rose, but he did ask her, "You have a passport?" She nodded and he had to shove down the jealous rush that jumped up as he imagined her with some French dude in Paris. "This woman has me by the balls." He coughed and muttered, "Bahamas it is. Cover for me." "For a honeymoon?" Michelle asked. "No," Eli interjected before Nathaniel had a chance to even breathe. "We are not getting married." Rose emphatically shook her head. "No, tell them we are not." He smiled to Nathaniel. "So you've got it covered, yeah?" "Yeah. Hey, you tell her." "Yes. Listen, I want to get off the phone so I can stare at this gorgeous creature and you're keeping me from that. So cut it out with the questions. I'll tell you all about it later tonight. Rose and I are not sleeping together. I'm coming over. Or you guys can come over to my new place." Rose lost her smile. "We're not." Eli laughed. "No, we're not. We're waiting until we're in the Bahamas. Because I say so and I am the master. Right." She grinned while biting her bottom lip. "Mom." Nathaniel chuckled. "All right, see you back at our old place." "See ya there." He hung up. Rose pointed at his phone. "What happened?" He glanced at the shattered face of it, all taped with Scotch tape. "Had a little accident." He smiled and put the phone back in his pocket. She didn't need to know everything. Leaning forward, he took one of her fries and said, "I'm buying the tickets," and plopped it into his mouth triumphantly. "No," she exclaimed. "It's going to be expensive with no notice like this." Wagging a thick finger, he said, I'm the guy. I'm buying the tickets. Trust me, we do really well and I haven't bought anything in a long while. Don't you worry about it. I'll get the hotel. What, do you want to cut my balls off right here and now?" He leaned back in the chair with his hands up. She laughed and shook her head. "That's what I thought. You'll want these to stay right where they are, I assure you." She wadded up her napkin and threw it at his face. He caught it easily and set it back down. "I'm a big fan of this aggression you've got going on." It wasn't a lie. It turned him on to have her fight him, and he'd been half-hard for over an hour now. "Let's get you home. I have some planning to do." Rose's eyelashes fluttered with simultaneous disappointment and excitement. She hastily adopted an expression of cool disdain but then started jumping up and down like a child. "Oh, the Bahamas. Oh my God, I can't wait, I can't wait, I can't wait." He laughed, threw down $100 bill and let her out of there, smacking her on the ass on the way out. Chapter 37. Not the type to meticulously pack, Rose threw her clothes from the closet to a suitcase lying on her unmade bed. She was humming to herself an indiscernible tune. She opted for light clothes with bright colors that could layer well if the nights got crisp. She had two bikinis, one sexy black, the other bright pink that bordered on neon. She'd torn apart the cupboards above her closet, searching for a wide-brimmed hat before she burst out laughing, realizing she'd never bought one in her entire life. She just always wanted one. Her phone rang and she jumped over piles of rejects to get to it, sweeping it off the bed. "Hello. So you know," Michelle said with a gravity uncommon to her. Rose plopped on the bed and looked out her window at the city. The idea that werewolves were real, were out there doing good things, and that she was going on vacation with one had her drunk from the mind-opening paradigm shift. "Yes. I wanted to tell you. I've been dying to say something. I almost gave it away." "You did give it away, kind of. I knew you were hiding something and..." She stopped, her years of law snapping her mouth quiet. "We shouldn't be talking over the phone about this." Michelle agreed. "But I want to talk to you. I finally can. This sucks. Can I come over?" "Yes. Come over. Now. I need help packing. Bring Xanax. I'm too happy." "Kidding. Don't bring it." Michelle laughed. "You're delirious. Weren't you?" "I guess I was. I'll be right over." She hung up and Rose dropped the phone on the bed, grinning at her suitcase. A vacation with a hunky werewolf who wanted to be her master. And here she was. Worried her 30th birthday 2 weeks ago meant it was all over for her. "What a dork," she whispered. 20 minutes later, Michelle was tearing through her suitcase with approval. "Except for this. This color flattens you out." She tossed a dark purple dress aside. "You're too pale and with your light hair and eyes it'll wear you." Rose pouted. "I love that dress." Picking it up. "It'd be better on me." Michelle laughed at the frown thrown her I've got dark hair and eyes, it'll blend well. Trust me. Go with pastels and red is fantastic. Other than red, black is the only dark shade you should wear. Bright red is best. Okay. Rose threw the dress at her friend. Take it. You convinced me. Michelle socked it away and held up the pink bikini. Oh, I love this. He will drool. Rose giggled and threw her hand over her mouth. I just fucking giggled. Busting up laughing, Michelle pointed at her. Yeah, you fucking did. Listen to us. We're like sailors. My dad would slap my face if he heard me. She got quiet and folded up a sundress. She glanced at her friend to find compassion staring back at her. He'd be really proud of you. Rose nodded, but then mischief danced up from her heart. Not if he knew I was dating a werewolf. Michelle shook her head on a slow grin. Can you believe it? You know what? I can. She continued to fold and sort the pile, tucking everything into the suitcase. He's just different in so many ways, it feels right to have a reason that ties it all together. I'm so good at figuring out who people really are. That's how I present my cases. I can show the truth and explain it in a way that makes the jury able to see what I see. But Eli is just so complex, even though he comes off as a dude. When he was walking me home from the burger place last night, he told me all about the string of abused women he's helped. They keep appearing before him, he says, like it's his duty, and by some design he doesn't second guess, even though he doesn't know where it comes from. Werewolves, Michelle. I mean, what else is out there that we just think are stories? I know. Michelle pulled up her knees tightly to her chest, sitting on the bed. I've asked myself the same thing. Does this mean there's a God too? Rose rolled her eyes. If you'd have seen Eli's body, you'd know there's a God. Busting up again, Michelle agreed. I feel the same way about Nathaniel. I'm so glad you know. Rose stopped folding. Thank you for bringing him to Gotham. Making a face, her friend leaned forward. You have no idea how awful I felt when he rushed over to you guys. I thought for sure your date was going to be crushed. Knowing what I knew about what they are and the way Eli looked as the guys tried to talk him down, I was so scared. I bet. Michelle stared into the memory like it was happening all over again. But then when you guys raced out of there, Dark turned to Dontae and waited. Nothing had to be said. Dontae glowered at him and finally growled, fine. We all left the restaurant then to find you. You know the rest. She threw up her hand. Oh no, that's not true. You don't know that when Eli came back to our flat, he was practically skipping. He was so cute. Don't call him cute. Rose headed for the bathroom. He's going to be here soon. Have to get my toiletries. The two of them picked out what was needed together, and Michelle grabbed the unopened box of condoms. You have any more of these? Shut up. Rose laughed. That's a pack of 30. What are you going to do the second night? She burst into a series of giggles, clearly exaggerating, but Rose couldn't help but feel very excited. Anyway, a loud knock at the front door was followed by Eli shouting through it, Bahamas, here we come. Rose leapt up from where she kneeled in front of her bathroom cupboard. She glanced to the mirror and saw a pink flush in her cheeks, her light blue sundress making her eyes shine. Before she ran out of the room, she turned and whispered, just so you know, we are not getting married. Throwing up her hands, her best friend mouthed, okay. Chapter 38. They'd taken an American Airlines flight from Newark, New Jersey to Nassau, where they had to switch to Air Bahamas, taking the shuttle plane to Arthur Town, the only way to get to Cat Island by air. Eli wouldn't tell her anything about the place he'd booked, and she expected it to be some huge hotel, but when the car he'd hired to pick them up drove up to a secluded sandy beach, she shoved her nose to the window. Is this it? There were small bungalows widely set apart, all the same size. This is it. Shanna's Cove. You like it? She flipped around and threw her arms around him, kissing him hard. I love Eli. I love it so much. He laughed and caught the driver's smile in the rearview as he pulled into a dirt parking spot. Jumping out of the car, he opened the door for them and Eli got out, then offered his hand. Rose took it and rose up into bright sunlight, a warm breeze blowing over them and lifting her blue sundress. He had on faded blue jeans and a graphic t-shirt that said, Don't even. Both of them wore sunglasses, and Rose had made him put on sunscreen before they switched planes. He'd acquiesced only when she offered to put it on him herself. He'd told her he could let her do that all day long. We'll get the bags, thanks. Eli handed the man a tip, an amount she couldn't see from how he stuffed it into the guy's hand. Pulling their bags from the trunk, he said, "Lead the way." She was so excited as she walked down the sand-covered primitive steps, holding onto the thick rope railing. Which one? She spun around for an answer, happy to see him smiling as widely as she was. The one nearest the ocean. It's called Bungalow Dolphin. Pulling her hair up into a messy bun, she headed for it, her flip-flops flapping against her heels. Look at the water, Eli. It's turquoise and so clear. Look, you can see the coral reefs out there. How far is that? He gauged it and offered a guess. 50 feet, maybe 55. We'll swim out later. She stopped walking and covered her face, trying not to cry. The knowledge that it had taken her quitting to come to a place like this that she hadn't made the time before, when it was always here, hit her hard. You okay? He set the suitcases down and took her into his arms. She couldn't speak, trying so hard not to lose it. Tell me you're not crying because you hate it, he teased, trying to get her to smile. The idea was so ridiculous her near breakdown turned to laughter and she burrowed into his chest. It's perfect. I love it. Thank you. She looked up and closed her eyes for a kiss, which he gladly gave her. They kissed deeply, the sun on their faces. When they separated, he grabbed the suitcases and motioned for the bungalow. They said the key is under the mat. No one's here to let us in? She asked, though it wasn't that surprising. They were way out from any other properties, residential or otherwise. He gestured to the main house with his chin, a 2-story brown building that had tables on a balcony meant for guest dining. I told them we'd be fine. Just describe where to go, and we'd find the way. Rose headed for the door and bent to lift the mat, the key there as promised. She held it up and wiggled it like here goes nothing. She was nervous, suddenly knowing they were going to be alone here for a whole week. Unlocking the door, she entered the sweetest cottage with a sloped wood ceiling that looked like the inside naked frame of a tugboat turned upside down. She kicked off her shoes to feel the blue tile under her feet, and her eyes fell to the single king-sized bed. Her heart started beating faster and she spun around to find a balcony that faced the ocean with 2 chairs just waiting to be sat in. Eli set their bags down and looked around. Just like in the photos, he said to himself, pleased. Don't be nervous. She glanced to him quickly. How do you? Oh yeah. Can you really hear my heartbeat? He nodded, his eyes smiling as he locked the door. That's so neat. He chuckled and crossed to her, picking her up and throwing her over his shoulder like a caveman would. He tossed her onto the bed and she bounced on it, her body heating up with anticipation. He tore off the light t-shirt and glanced around the room. I'm not used to this kind of dry heat. He was glistening with sweat and smelled fucking delicious. Rose went to pull off her sundress, eager to get naked, but stopped at his warning glance. Oh, I forgot. He held up a finger. Don't let it happen again. He chuckled and kicked off his blue Converse, bending for the socks as he muttered. This is the last time I'll wear socks until we leave. Are you uncomfortable? She asked, worried. He made a face. I love being naked. Are you kidding? It's how I prefer to be. And with that, off went the jeans and Rose felt herself clench with an ache to feel him inside her for the very first time. He walked toward her with nothing on but a sexy smirk, his dimple pressed into the stubble on his cheek. Her skin caught fire as his eyes raked a searing glance over her body. You want to keep that? My dress? She glanced down to it. Yes. She wasn't sure. He laughed at the hesitancy. You like it when I tear your clothes off? Feeling herself start to throb, she nodded and swallowed, eyes falling to his engorged cock. He caught her look and palmed himself, then standing at the edge of the bed, grabbed one of her legs and pulled her to him. Within 2 seconds her dress was off and his eyebrows shot up. No underwear? She shrugged and grinned at him flirtatiously. I knew it would be hot. It's fucking hot, all right, he said thickly, running rough hands all over her body. She chuckled. No, I mean hot. He met her eyes and climbed on top of her until she had lowered herself, lying beneath him with her hair fanned out on the red comforter. I know what you mean. Electricity shot down her legs as his fingers discovered her pussy. You're wet for me already. A different kind of smile lit up his face and he leaned down to whisper in her ear, giving her soft lobe A tender lick. I can smell when you want me, by the way. You can? She asked, surprised. Some. He murmured into her neck, nuzzling her as his fingers worked into her folds. They were swollen with need, and the instant she felt him, her legs opened on their own. She wanted him as close as a person can get to another person, or in this case to a beast she was just beginning to understand. Tell me everything you can do, she moaned as he stroked her. He nibbled on her neck, then bit down on it. She felt instinctively that he was marking her, and she knew it was his wolf, that she was now his, just like he'd said. He gnawed on her flesh, not breaking the skin, the massage of his teeth hypnotizing her, powerless. When he finished, he took her lips, and there was nothing gentle about the kiss. Roughly they delved in to explore each other and mold each other's mouths like clay. She cried out as her body began to shake. The surge of feelings for him and the skill of his fingers brought her to climax much quicker than she knew was going to happen. He cupped her and watched her face eagerly as she closed her eyes and arched her neck and back. The sensation's so strong. I can move very fast. He breathed into her skin as he chewed his way down her chest. No, keep doing what you're doing. He paused, then chuckled. No, I'm telling you what I can do. My abilities. I'm not moving fast with sex. Oh, she laughed and lifted her head to watch him working his way from one of her sensitive nipples to the other, treating each like they were precious. What else? He kneeled in front of her open legs and stared at her wet pussy and bent to give it a kiss, holding himself up with one hand on the bed, the other opening her wider. His shoulders, when he was hunched over like that, were so hot she couldn't stop staring at them. The muscles on the arm that held him up were flexed with each move he made. I'm strong. And I can see in the dark. That's so cool, she whispered, watching him rise up and lift up his manhood. The width gorgeous. He slid the crimson tip up and down her slippery folds and closed his eyes on a low groan. I want to rip you apart. She reached over and touched him. He moaned and pushed just the tip closer to her throbbing opening. She wanted him so badly and was a little scared of his size. Go slow, she whispered. He nodded and met her eyes. I promise you I will. She saw them glow again and smiled, knowing he wouldn't run this time if she told him. But she didn't want him self-conscious. She wanted him just like this. I'm ready, she whispered. His eyebrows lifted and his eyes glowed hotter, changing from amber to pale. Honey. His lips parted and she could see his teeth were a little different. Was terrifying and exhilarating at the same time. Her heartbeat slammed in her chest, and he looked toward the sound and touched her between her breasts, pressing his hand into her skin. I won't hurt you. You're safe with me. Eli, that's why I'm excited, she breathed. He stopped stroking himself and leaned down to kiss her, and this kiss was tender and loving. She wrapped her fingers around his head and held him to her, gently kissing him back. Her heart slowed down, a calming knowledge taking over her that this was right, that they were supposed to be together. He gasped as he pulled back, searching her eyes. She wanted to ask him if he'd felt what she just had, but she decided not to. It was enough for her to know. I need you inside of me now. He nodded and licked his lips, giving her one more kiss before he rose up and positioned himself. His fingers dug into her hips as he pulled her closer to his cock, and his eyes stayed on her pussy. Watching him look at her like that was such an amazing feeling. He pressed into her an inch deep and groaned. You're so tight. She moaned as her body relaxed, wanting him. He pressed in an inch deeper and glanced up to check in with her. She nodded and he pressed in more, his girth spreading her walls. He thrust in a little more this time. Like his body couldn't go slow anymore. She watched him fight himself. Just do it. He shook his head. I don't want to hurt you, he rasped, staring at where their bodies were joining. He pressed in again, but the pleasure overcame him and he thrust into the hilt with an unleashed plunge. She moaned and her back arched. There was a little bit of pain, but only a little, and it only made the sensation heighten. His eyes flew open. Shit. Are you okay? Very okay, she smiled, and he relaxed. His muscular hips took over and he filled her again and again. The sounds he made were incredible and pushed her higher into ecstasy. He collapsed on top of her and his mouth caught hers. They moved together, their bodies taking over, the symmetry blending until the room disappeared. It was only Eli and Rose and nothing else mattered. He gasped and released her lips, craning his neck as he tried to stay his orgasm. She watched his face, thinking she'd never seen anyone more handsome. The way his body felt on top of her, the sheer skin-to-skin weight and how much he filled her so completely, moving faster when she wanted him to and slowing down when her moans dictated. They came together, embracing their bodies, covered in a slick, hot sweat. He showered her with kisses and just like on the street, repeated her name over and over like he couldn't believe she was real. Chapter 39. In the morning, Eli threw Rose into the pale turquoise ocean as far as his strength could. She screamed as she flew through air, landing an impressive distance away. Bursting up from the clear salt water, she threw back her wet hair and called back, "That's the best you've got?" He faked anger and came running into the water to get her, his movements slowed by the awkward sand and waves. This was the first time he'd been to a beach, and it was something else. He was eager to describe it to the guys. It was a little hot for him with his warm blood, but the ocean was the salve his wolf had been craving. He dove in the rest of the way and swam to her. This was nothing. He was a strong swimmer from his years by a river that had a hell of a strong current. The salt in the water here hurt his eyes, so he had to find Rose by sound. She made it easy as she splashed, trying to get away from him. He used the vibrations of her veins sending sound currents and the splashing to lead him straight to her. He grabbed her legs and pulled her under, hearing her scream before she submerged. They were both laughing their heads off when they came up for air, and she threw her arms and legs around him, the sun shining on her. Her eyes matched the water and his smile went intimate as he stared at her, transfixed. "You're beautiful." Her smile changed and she kissed him. "Thank you, Eli. Too bad I have to drown you." He breathed into her neck, then grabbing her waist to throw her as far as he could, because he had to pull her out of the water first. The distance wasn't as far as last time, but she still screamed the whole way. She plunged into the ocean, then reappeared and yelled at him, "You bastard! You tricked me." She took off swimming. He called over with a grin, "I really do think you're beautiful," his hand cupping his mouth for comedic effect. When she didn't come back, he suddenly thought of sharks and dove underwater like a flash. Within seconds, thanks to his speed, she was in his arms again. She fought him, but not that hard. He held her fists and looked around the water. "What's wrong?" she asked, getting quiet and looking around too to see what he saw. He shrugged and laughed it off. "All of a sudden I had this image of sharks eating you and me not there to stop them." Blinking away the droplets of ocean water that slid down onto his lashes, he frowned. She ran her finger down the crease like he'd done to her. "The only wild creature who's going to eat me is you." She reached into his shorts and pulled out his cock. "What's this?" "Look what I found." Frown vanishing, Eli chuckled. "I think you should keep exploring it to find out." "Is that an order?" Her eyes went smoky. "What do you think?" he said simply. With mischief in her eyes, she stroked him and reached down lower to take his sack in her hand, fondling it and running her fingers around where it met his body. She glanced to the beach, but he reassured her, "No one's there. I can hear when someone comes." "Oh," she smiled, her breath hitching. She licked her lips and allowed him to manipulate her body, raising her up and down on his cock. Their breathing synchronized and they kissed as he got harder and she more open to him. Sliding slowly in and out, he filled her as far as he could go, loving how tight she was and all the great sounds she made when he stretched her. She wanted more, and he had a lifetime of it to give to her. When their orgasms came, hers brought his on and he rocked in her, squeezing her tight and biting her shoulder. She bit him back and he groaned at the welcome sensation. "There's the tigress again," he smirked, holding her to him even as he softened inside her body. "Rawr," she growled like a human would, and he laughed. "Eli." "Yeah." He kissed his way up her neck. She didn't answer, so he met her eyes and cocked an eyebrow. She looked like she was going to say something, and it wasn't. "I'm hungry." He searched her and let it go. "Let's get some breakfast." In Bungalow Dolphin, he changed into dry clothes and she caught him watching her slide into a sundress. He guessed from her laugh that his look must have shown what he was thinking. "Oh no, you don't. I want to get some food." He ignored that and took her against the wall anyway, reminding her that he called the shots, and enjoying every moan and whimper she made as she trembled once again in his arms. Over the next 3 days they went diving and explored the destinations. Promise Shipwreck, which was very cool, and something neither of them had ever seen. They swam with tortoises and all kinds of beautiful saltwater fish they didn't know the names of. When she suggested looking them up, he took the phone from her and laid it down, telling her it was more interesting to keep it a mystery. She'd smiled at him, and he couldn't help but think the true mystery was how good he felt when he was with her. He'd never been away from his pack for this long, but he didn't mind at all. He would never have guessed that. He decided it was time